Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you, Stefan, for this vision and the first idea of the landscape in blockchain here today and in the investment space. I'm here basically to share my experience with you. I've been in this space since 2013 and mainly as an investor. I'm not a tech guy. I come from the private equity and VC world. So in 2013, after I learned about Bitcoin, there were two events that triggered a bit more interest in that space. The first event was the Cyprus bail-in, where the government decided that they would take a certain amount of money to all the accounts in that island. And the second event was the first investment in Coinbase, which I think at the time was about a few $1 million, maybe 6 million. And that showed that there was interest from VCs and angel investors, and my interest was not to just buy Bitcoin or buy some, at the time, mainly Bitcoin actually. So not to just buy Bitcoin, but actually to look at the startups and help them grow and develop. So I created the first global incubator of Bitcoin startups, and we organized the first conference in Asia around this theme. This was Bitcoin Singapore back in November 2013. And that's how we started our network in this space, talking to a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs around the world. So from the beginning, this was approached as a very global movement, akin to what happened in the late 90s with the internet. And then in 2014, I moved to London. So this was happening out of Hong Kong. I moved to London to set up a company called Coinsilium, with the idea was to list on a public market, which we did in December 2015 at Next Exchange here in London. So Coinsilium is a venture builder, an investor. We have invested in 18 blockchain companies around the world, and some of them are here. So Factom, which is a leader in the mortgage industry in the US. They have devised solutions to anchor data on different blockchains. RSK, which has devised very interesting concept of smart contracts validated by the Bitcoin blockchain. Indoors, which is a kind of decentralized LinkedIn, which rewards users for actually sharing their data, making claims, and enable users to actually own and monetize their data. And Blocks, which is a great cryptocurrency portfolio management tool and a social trading platform. So, you know, having been in this space since 2013, at first it was not easy to get through the door of institutions. We had a lot of education to make, so it was very helpful when mainstream magazines or Harvard Business Review and The Economist were talking about this back in 2015, 2016. And Harvard Business Review, the authors of an article, qualified blockchain as a foundational technology, meaning that there will be a long-term impact on society, and as they say, enabling the new foundations in economic and social systems. So that means that we are beyond the technology framework. We are going into a space where people, entrepreneurs, are building solutions that can affect the way we live and that can affect the foundations of our social and economic systems, which is, to me, was really one of the key drives in this space. So this is just to show that we started quite early, but after mid-year 2015 and 2016, many institutions, many banks, insurance companies, global companies all over the world started investing in this space. One of the reasons why they were investing in this space is actually there is a great shortage of talent, and therefore the best way to reach this talent and to acquire this talent is actually to buy the startups or to invest in the startups in this space. So it's all coming really from entrepreneurs and developers out there building these solutions. So up there in this table, we have what we could invest in back in 2013, 14, which I would refer to as the transactional services and solutions for this space. So basically the pipes, right? The wallets, the exchanges, the remittance companies, different solutions really related mostly obviously to Bitcoin, because that was the buzzword back in 2013, 14, and then it moved to blockchain and platforms. So we started investing in this type of companies, and then 2015, 16, we started looking much more at platforms on which you can build thousands of applications. And these are the type of applications that have come up and using blockchain technologies. So for example, security, data, smart contracts, and of course, Internet of Things. In many ways, cryptocurrencies speak the natural language of Internet and speak the natural language of IT systems. And that's why it is so compatible and naturally compatible with this sector. So for example, Internet of Things. And of course, machine-to-machine payments. So here I give a few examples of companies we work with. In addition to being an investor and somehow an accelerator as well of startups, we also are today an advisor. And then we'll talk, of course, about the wave of ICOs that has happened last year. And these are some, so around the logos of these companies are companies we either invested in or we have been advising, or we are advising right now. And in the center, you see actually different areas, different activities which are being affected by blockchain and in different sectors. So for example, securities, of course, we all have read articles about stock exchanges, companies looking at using blockchain as a back office infrastructure type technology, crowdfunding, of course, derivatives. There have been many reports about the use of blockchain in this field. Record keeping, which is something that Factom does very well as well. And then we see title records, ownership, IP, voting, healthcare, and of course digital currency, which is the origin of all this very large new sector. And here quickly, just a few companies that we're helping in this space. So what happened? This is kind of the origin of the ICO wave, which has really taken over the world last year. It all happened in 2016, kind of caught off guard most of us, even people in this space. I mean, we've seen ICOs back in 2013 and 14. One of the main ones, of course, was Ethereum back in summer 2014. But in 2016, in the fall, a few companies come, First Blood, and then these ones, Golem, and they start raising, or more accurately, selling tokens very quickly and for quite large amounts of money. So that attracted a lot of attention at the time. And as we saw, the more it went last year, after going into 2017, there were more and more token sales, and they were reasonably successful. And so much that actually, first of all, the amount that was collected and the proceeds of this token sale has reached huge amounts. And at the same time, there were a lot of hedge funds and investors gathering to specifically focus on this space. So we saw a market spike in the total market capitalization. This doesn't include a Bitcoin. This is what we call altcoins and other tokens, basically. And this shows that there was this huge movement last year, which really took off Q2 2017. And then I'm going to talk here more about what happened in June. So in June 2017 is remarkable for a few things. First of all, the amount that was raised by these companies, this new way of ICO, actually has overtaken the traditional investment. So at that time, there was more money coming from selling tokens for these new companies than actually traditional investors were using fiat and using traditional ways of investing. So that was June 2017. And at the same time, we saw the Bitcoin dominance of the cryptocurrency world in terms of market cap actually going below 50%, and then it starts showing the emergence of all these new cryptocurrencies and tokens. And that's a big change in this space where Bitcoin was dominant until then. So as an investor, it also changed the way we look at this space and we look at investments, in the sense that, first of all, a plethora of companies come and start raising money and start saying, well, we don't need traditional investors. We just go to the market and we sell our tokens, right? So here we have a very small sample of ICOs, and the value identification and the way to assess these companies becomes more complex, and especially in light of the fact that these companies now have a market cap in tokens which is completely different from any value of their equity, for example. So it makes our work very different. So why token sales have become so popular last year? Well, first of all, despite all this noise and what we hear in the media, actually there were not so many. Of course, it's growing, but there were not so many investors, VC funds, etc., really understanding this space. So that's why a lot of entrepreneurs were frustrated that the first thing they would do before pitching their project was to actually educate potential investors, and spending a lot of time on that. So they decided, why don't I go to people who already hold cryptocurrencies, who know what's going on in this space? Then it became a very attractive other option in the world of investment because it's non-dilutive, right? So you're issuing tokens, you're not issuing equity. So in a way, it made sense for a lot of entrepreneurs to use this new way of non-dilutive financing. And at the same time, there were good examples out there, some projects which have raised a lot of money this way. In general, banks are not helping. I mean, in general, they are not usually helping entrepreneurs, but in this space, it's even worse because of the relationship with cryptocurrencies, which they don't necessarily see as a positive. And of course, new tools have become available. So among all these entrepreneurs, among all these startups, actually, many were building solutions enabling just that, enabling the issuance of new tokens, smart contracts, and all the tools, and some of which Stefano was mentioning before, all these decentralized applications. So if you look at the parallel with the .com figures, first of all, .com was in numbers much larger, but in terms of the number of companies that actually have survived, we could be in a similar position in the future, meaning a lot of new companies, a lot of creativity, but we already see a little bit of saturation. There are some sectors where you have so many ICOs that users, investors, token buyers, they don't really see the difference that clearly, and that's exactly what happened back in the 90s. The fact that there were a lot of copycats, a lot of similar projects out there, but eventually it gave birth to huge companies, global corporations that we know today and that we use, the Amazons of this world, the Netflix, etc. And these are byproducts. Have been born with the internet wave back in the late 90s. So as I was saying, non-dilutive. Now, of course, tokens enable usually users to access a platform. Can be a reward, a right, what we call access tokens, utility tokens. In 2017, especially the early part of 2017, you didn't need to demonstrate revenues, but now this is changing, or at least you need to show an MVP, a minimum viable product, something that people can refer to. Why? Because people are getting worried, that the project may not go as good as the team is pretending it could go, and therefore they want to see something concrete before they buy the tokens. Now, the legal costs initially can be lower than an IPO, but actually all the costs around ICOs are growing because there are many and because there is competition, and there are not so many service providers really. There are not so many legal firms that are really understanding this space and can provide quality service, and so therefore the costs are rising globally. Of course, there is a nearly immediate liquidity because people are sending you cryptocurrency with a specific market value. You're sending them your own tokens. Basically, you get nearly immediate liquidity. And at the same time, for the investors, as soon as the tokens get listed on an exchange, they are free to trade normally, the tokens. There is, of course, this network effect that is created through the promotion of the token, through the usage of the token. But we are slowly moving now to the space where we see the results, and we'll see if the tokens are actually useful and the platforms are actually well built and can provide the service they have been saying they could provide. So basically, it's a whole development of a new ecosystem. This is just a few numbers, but at the time, it's around mid-2017, shows some of the largest ICOs out there. Of course, the numbers are in US dollars, which of course is always based on the price of Ethereum. Most of these companies raised using Ethereum, and therefore, it depends on the prices. So it could be much more right now for these companies. And this is showing basically the different type and the fact that actually token sales are being used by a very large number of industries, and it's not limited to, let's say, financial services. It goes into media, social, gaming, Internet of Things, as I was referring before, finance, cloud, core tech. It's very varied. What are the challenges as an entrepreneur? It's not as easy. So part of my headline and title of this speech is about the fiction part as well. So I would say part of the fiction is to think that it's easy to do a token sale as an entrepreneur, and it's really not. There are many challenges along the way. First of all, security. We all know that we are in this space. This is cryptocurrency. This is internet. This is IT. So there are hacking risks, as we all know. Then there are other risks, legal, tax risk. We've seen with the SEC recently. We yet to know the reaction of many central banks, governments, regulators around the world to know how they qualify this. The tax authorities in most jurisdictions have not really given a clear answer to how they consider ICO. So, entrepreneurs have to keep this in mind. Now, when the entrepreneurs are working on these ICOs, they focus a lot of attention on that, so it can delay actually the development of the actual product. And also, they should keep in mind that an ICO turns your company, even a tiny company anywhere in the world, instantly into a public company, and suddenly you have 24/7, you have questions coming from all over the world, from everywhere, people asking you about your product, the team, the timeline, the model, the token model, etc. So it puts a lot of pressure on relatively small companies. And of course, the token price becomes a major concern, and again, can distract from the original goals. Now, as an investor, as I was saying, there is this new focus on token value versus equity value. In some cases, there is no real equity value. If it's a foundation, for example, it's supposed to be a non-profit entity. But sometimes, we have invested, and we basically have solely invested in equity since 2013. But we have invested in companies that later have done ICOs and have issued their own token. So we have both. We see the market cap of the tokens, and we see the value of the shares and the potential appreciation of the value of these shares. So the challenges is the token utility and the token price become a major concern as an investor, of course. This unclear regulatory environment, but there are some jurisdictions such as Gibraltar, for example, taking a proactive stance and looking at that and actually regulating the DLT market, and soon announcing regulation in the ICO market as well, and the token sales. There is this undefined relationship between the token buyer and the token issuer. The fact that as a token buyer, you have no rights on the assets of the company, and you have usually no voting rights as well, and basically no rights on what the company is doing with the cryptocurrency you're sending. The due diligence should take longer, but there are many ICOs out there, so unfortunately not everyone is doing proper job in looking at that. And of course, a very good project, a very good team may actually make the mistake of proposing the wrong token model, and then it can undermine the whole project. And the token price, as we saw, for example, in the last few days, where there are problems on major exchanges, as we have heard, then the token price can depreciate, and it has nothing to do with the actual value or the quality of the work of that team. This is to show, well, these numbers are actually outdated, but it was to show the fact that crowdfunding was much, these companies were much higher in terms of the number of transactions, volume of transactions, and crowdfunding was higher. but actually these numbers have to be updated for the current numbers and the current Ether price, of course. So how is ICO trend affecting blockchain investments? So it's really reshaping the whole way people are investing in this space. Investors now, they need to find what we call pre-sale deal, pre-ICO, private sale, is this time when you can get a specific bonus, you can get special conditions on the tokens before it is issued to the public. Blockchain fund managers, people like us who have been investing in this space for 5 years, we become usually advisors because this is a new form of relationship with these companies. And we basically help them to do the token sale. The angel investors are becoming, token buyers, token evangelists. They go around the world and they just stay at home, but they do a lot of promotion on the social media. And the investment platforms, they become token channels basically to sell all these tokens. So we are moving from basically the regular, equity model to a data-rich model and focus on tokens. So my predictions for the next 12 months, I think ICOs will continue to grow as a popular way to raise funds and as a popular way to actually finance new projects. Of course, it is more suitable for decentralized projects and blockchain-based projects, but today is not stopping anyone from in any other area, any other mainstream area, even not that much related to technology, to actually try and issue a token. As I was saying, investors and entrepreneurs develop a new form of relationship, and there are improvements in technology to limit some security risks, and also a better way to manage these tokens. As I was mentioning, there are the first regulatory frameworks coming out in the world, and one we work with mainly is Gibraltar, and they're really the first to actually have taken this approach and regulate this market. And then we will start seeing the first mergers and acquisitions, among token communities, protocols and applications, which will be very interesting. There is still some work to be done. There was a post recently about someone using the Black-Scholes equation to actually find token value. That's quite interesting. So I think there will be more work in terms of financial engineering to see the value of these token economies. I think there will be $10 billion worth of tokens sold between now and the end of the year, most probably, could be more. And what is really important is that tokens are emerging as a new asset class, which is quite historical in the world in our economy. And at the same time, I just want to say a few words about the cryptocurrency price. I see cryptocurrency prices more as a visible part of the iceberg. And as Stefan was saying, there's still a lot of projects, a lot of solution services to be built on blockchain. So don't get over-focused on the price. This is just a part of this industry. A lot of work is being done in developing very useful, very interesting technology. And a lot of entrepreneurs are building what we can call the foundations of a token-based economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eddy.
Thank you.